Mysteries await just a page away. Ready to dive in? Welcome to The Book Reader, where stories unfold one enchanting page at a time. Subscribe now and unlock the magic.
Richard Branson. Losing My Virginity, the Autobiography. Chapter 1. 30 Diversity and Adversity. 1998-2005. An enormous amount has happened in the last decade. This book opens with my first attempt to fly around the world in a balloon, a trip that ended up in the deserts of Algeria. It was my last ballooning trip, at the end of 1998, however, which finally knocked some sense into me. I realized that it was perhaps time to put to better use everything I'd learned during my personal adventures. However, it had been a magnificent trip. When we were about to set off, someone suggested to me that I keep a diary, and I've dusted that down to use here. Rather than cut it, I'm going to let you see it as I wrote it, so that you can get a sense of what it's like to be adrift, thousands of feet above the surface of the earth, with just the wind to power you. Day 1, December 18, 1998. This is a daily diary for Theo, my godson, who saw us lift off today from Marrakesh, for Loki, India, Woody, for all my special nephews and nieces, and for my children Holly and Sam. The delightful Moroccans welcomed us like brothers. Holly and Joan arrived at the airport. The balloon looked like a magnificent mosque, and the sun was rising up over the Atlas Mountains. Strangely, I wasn't enormously nervous on this occasion. We'd had such a good team planning this. We'd been through so much heartache in the past that I really felt that this time we had a good chance. The only serious problem was that last night the Americans and British had started bombing Iraq. And we are due to fly along the Iraqi border in 30 hours' time, some 50 miles from it. We have Bob Rice, the best weatherman in the world. He believes he can help us find the winds to carry us right along the border without crossing into it. I've promised him that we will stuff him instead of the turkey this Christmas, if he gets it wrong. That is, if we are not already stuffed ourselves. Almost all of my closest friends and family, except Sam, who had to be at school, had flown in to see us off, after having just traveled all the way with us to the Caribbean the day before to go on holiday. The moment we arrived there, I was told to go all the way back, because we had found the perfect weather. Weather so perfect that, if nothing goes too wrong, we could be back on my grandfather's birthday, Boxing Day. We arrived to a wonderful welcome of musicians, camels, jugglers, and even flying carpets. Alex Ritchie's children, Alistair and Duncan, my daughter Holly and Per's daughter Jenny, were together to press the button to launch us into the air. We put on our parachutes. We said our goodbyes to my mum and dad, my brother-in-law, my daughter, and my friends. Tears were in their eyes. Countdown 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, then liftoff. We gently climbed 2,000 feet. The door was still open. Everyone was clapping and cheering. Then suddenly we started to sink. We had hit a weather inversion. We burned hard to warm the helium. We burst through the inversion. I realized we had overburned. We were shooting up and the bottom of the balloon was smoldering. 1,700 feet a minute, 1,800 feet, 1,900 feet, until at last we were slowing, but the liquid burners had burned holes in the bottom of the hot air balloon. Fortunately for us, they were right at the bottom. It was the helium balloon that was the critical one. We could fly on ugly holes, but nothing to stop us. It's wonderful. We are flying up with the birds, and we are on our way. Everything seems to be working. We are up to flight altitude, and the capsule has pressurized and the balloon has not burst. We are on our way at the beginning of a magnificent adventure, and there below us are the beautiful Atlas Mountains covered in snow. Day 2, December 19th, 1998. For hours we had a magnificent flight, watching the massive range of the Atlas Mountains that stretches across the whole of the north of Africa. From Morocco across Algeria, Libya, and almost, I believe, to Egypt. We bade farewell to the Moroccans after about 7 hours of flying, and then headed out over Algeria. Algeria has become a very sad country due to a terrible civil war that is going on. We were plunged into that 2 years ago when our balloon failed at night, and we had to land. But tonight we're flying along the Atlas Mountains, over the rugged desert where Alex and I had once had to throw everything we had out of our balloon to stop a rapid descent. We even threw out an envelope full of dollars. Alex saved our lives on that occasion by climbing out on the roof and releasing fuel tanks just before we hit the deck. This time everything seemed to be going well. Almost too well. When it began to get dark and the helium above us cooled, we turned on the burners. Instead of plunging, as we had on our last attempt around the world, the heat stopped any descent, and the flames lit up the Arabian skies around us. We had to be careful not to fly higher than we had during the day, or the heat would vent the helium and shorten the time we had in the sky. So we took it in turns to fly during the night. Then, very tired, we suddenly had a major spanner thrown in the works. A message from Libya came through saying they had withdrawn our right to fly over their country. It was nighttime, pitch black, It was nighttime, pitch black, and we could never land before crossing their border. Steve, Per and I debated what we could do about it. If we had gone very low, we might have been able to crawl around the south of Libya, but that would mean abandoning our dreams. In the end, we decided to slow up the balloon by dropping lower, to give us time to try to persuade Colonel Gaddafi, who rules Libya, that ours is a sporting mission undertaken in the interests of peace. The King of Jordan had been a great help to us previously, and I had also been honored in the past to know Nelson Mandela, and I knew he knew Colonel Gaddafi quite well. So my wonderful secretary Sue opened up my office in the early hours of the morning and got hold of their telephone numbers. Our next concern was the realization that they would all be asleep. The King of Jordan is unwell with cancer, and Nelson Mandela is not a young man, so I decided to write one of the most important letters in my life to Colonel Gaddafi. Excellency, I am making this personal and direct appeal to you from the ICO Global Challenger balloon, in which the General Post and Telecommunications Company of Libya has a significant investment. A mutual friend of ours, His Royal Highness King Hussein of Jordan, spoke to you about my plans to try to circumnavigate the globe in a balloon. You graciously granted us permission to cross your country. Early today we took off from Morocco in the certain knowledge that we had permission to overfly your country. We would not have done so had we not had the permission and goodwill of both Algeria and Libya. We are currently over Algeria, and we will cross your border in the early hours of this morning. Libyan overflight clearance permit OVG-11 at 01001 was graciously extended on July 20, 1998 to us for this flight. Your air traffic control personnel have just informed us that this permission has been rescinded. We obviously understand that they have every right to do this, but I'm afraid that it is impossible to land a balloon at night due to the icing that forms on the helium valve. We are unable to vent the helium to descend. Because of this emergency condition, we simply do not know how to avoid crossing your airspace. We hope that you will grant us emergency permission under these circumstances via your air traffic control services. Thank you for your understanding of this problem. I am, sir, your most obedient servant, Richard Branson. By that point we were all extremely tired, and purposefully flying much slower than the balloon was capable of, to give us time. Then the onboard phone rang, and we were told that, even though it was 1 o'clock in the morning, Colonel Gaddafi had granted us permission to go on. Although our route to go around the world had been made more difficult by the slower path, the bigger, immediate problem was that by slowing down we had changed direction and were headed towards a storm over Istanbul in Turkey. Hopefully we could ride above it. Whether through the pressure of all of this, or some bug, I was beginning to lose my voice. We decided I should go on a course of penicillin, just in case. Per remains as calm as I have ever seen him. His dream, that started so many years ago, is finally coming true. And Steve is a pleasure to have on board. He is the only one of us who ventures into the kitchen, producing an excellent Steve soup. Morning has now broken, and we have crossed the Libyan border. Miles and miles of desert, and a warm welcome from air traffic control in Tripoli. No military planes. Thank you, Colonel Gaddafi, from all of us in the ICO Global Balloon Team. Day 3, December 20th, 1998. I haven't slept since I last wrote my diary 24 hours ago. With good reason. Let me share these 24 hours with you. I only wish right now that you could be up here with us. However, there were some moments in the day I would not wish on you. Let me first explain the challenge that faces all us balloonists who want to go around the world. It is not just the elements or the technological challenge. Sadly, it also involves people and politics. As always in life, it is not the ordinary people who get in the way. It's a handful of politicians at the top who selfishly make their country and this world a sadder place to live. After all, this is a sporting challenge and a mission flown in peace. Let me begin by suggesting that you pull out a map. Imagine you are a balloonist in Switzerland, in America, or in Morocco as we were. Then cross out some of the countries whose politicians say you cannot cross: Russia, Iran, and Iraq. Imagine you're in a race to be the first around the world, and there are 7 other balloonists waiting to take off. All of them will likely go well south of Russia and Iraq. You know that they will not experience the same holdups that you have, so every second counts, and taking a risk becomes a necessity. So, when your weatherman says he believes he can squeeze you between Iran and Russia, instead of saying no, you take that risk. Even though it means flying down a 24-mile wide piece of land that is 2,600 miles from where you are taking off, and which is owned by Turkey and flanked by 2 countries in which you are not welcome. Remember, a balloon has no propulsion except the wind. The only way of steering is to change height as you go along to try to find winds going in a different direction. It helps you to have the best weatherman in the world. That weatherman tells you he thinks it can be done. You and your team decide to go for it. Then the night before you launch, you are told that the British and the Americans are bombing Iraq, and you are British and Steve Fawcett is American. And this particular path is within 50 miles of Iraq. You would probably be certifiably mad to continue, and until an hour ago I thought we were mad. But we knew our weatherman. We had worked with Bob Rice before over the Atlantic and Pacific, and we knew that if anyone could help get us through this narrow crack between 2 countries in which we have no permission to fly, it would be him. And the very minute I am writing this diary, we are coming out of the other end of the crack, with Iraq and Iran on one side of us and Russia on the other. We, with the help of our magnificent team back at base, have miraculously crept through. 24 hours ago, we said goodbye to Libya as it was getting dark, and headed out over the Mediterranean towards Cyprus. An RAF Hercules flew overhead. They said they were on their way to bomb Iraq. They wished us good luck, and we wished them the same. I had just tried to lie down to get some sleep when Steve shouted, "Get your parachute on. We've been told there's a very high thunderstorm ahead." Steve had lost his balloon in a similar thunderstorm over the Pacific only 2 months before, so he knew only too well what havoc they could wreak. By climbing, the wind would blow us over Iraq. What was worse, a possible storm ahead or the storms of Iraq? In the distance, we could see the traces of anti-aircraft fire. We decided to risk the thunder and pressed on. Somebody was looking over us. We not only missed the storm, but also missed Iraq by 30 miles, Iran by 7 miles, and Russia by 10 miles. Right now our weatherman can do no wrong. If he gets us home for Boxing Day, the champagne is on me. The views from where we are flying are breathtaking. We are crossing the snow-clad Armenian mountains. Below us is a little village called Ararat, where Noah landed in his Arkansas. Over our headsets came the crackly sound of the air traffic controller from Armenia. On behalf of all the Armenian people, we would like to say welcome. It was said with such genuine friendliness. If only all countries could be so welcoming. About 2,600 miles gone, the width of the Atlantic Ocean, 20,000 left to go. Everybody feeling incredibly exhilarated. I, for one, need to borrow somebody else's nails for the rest of the trip, because I no longer have any of my own left. Day 4, December 21, 1998. We are still flying, and our voyage becomes more awesome by the minute. We have moved from Turkey through our secret passage out into Armenia and over Mount Ararat. From there we went through Azerbaijan, a new independent state in the former USSR, out across the Caspian Sea, through Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan. We then passed over Afghanistan, where a bloody civil war has raged for years. Afghanistan was one of the countries that Alexander the Great once conquered. Then early this morning, a wonderful but rather frightening prospect dawned on us. The winds had unexpectedly changed, and we would not now be able to fly to the north of the largest mountain range in the world, but would have to go straight across them. These were the awesome Himalayas, never crossed before by a balloon. We would cross Nepal, a remote kingdom between India and Tibet. Nepal is where the Buddha was born, but is also known for the largest mountain on Earth, Mount Everest, which soars up to nearly 30,000 feet. This sounds wonderful, but, as with everything about trying to fly a balloon around the world, there was a catch. It is what's known as deadly curlover. A balloon can be grabbed by the wind and literally smashed into the other side of the mountain as one crosses it. To avoid this, we will need to fly 1,000 feet above the mountain for every 10 miles per hour we are traveling. We did our calculations based on our present speed of 80 miles per hour, and this meant we had to fly 8,000 feet above the mountain. At present we couldn't fly more than 30,000 feet, so we would have to fly 40,000 feet over Everest to avoid being smashed on to the other side of it. We couldn't do that. Could we and our team back home steer us between Everest and the next highest mountain, K2? Well, we won't know for a few more hours, so tomorrow if we succeed I'll let you know. Day 5, December 22, 1998. Well, I'm still here writing my diary, so we must have missed Everest and K2. In fact, we steered right between them, more by luck than skill this time, since the mountains had taken control of our direction, and they were not going to let us go. We spent the last 24 hours following the beautiful mountain range. In the day they were exquisite. At night having them a few thousand feet below was an eerie feeling. Adding to our problems were masses of ice forming on top of the balloon, blocking the helium valve. As daytime approached, enormous clumps of it would fall down onto our capsule. It was actually very beautiful, and I've made a wonderful film of our crossing of the Himalayas. Hannibal would have been proud of us. Because the winds died on us, we didn't suffer the deadly curlover effect that I wrote about in yesterday's diary. Day 6, December 23, 1998. We were 3 hours from crossing the Chinese border when they dropped a bombshell on us. We're revoking your permission to cross China. You will not enter. We had no choice. We couldn't land in the Himalayas. That would mean almost certain death. But to fly into China, when specifically told not to, can also mean very serious trouble. The Chinese had originally given us permission to cross the south of China. Because we had been sucked into the Himalayas, we were going to enter China 150 miles north of where they had asked us to. So we had 3 hours to try to persuade them to let us in. I knew Sir Edward Heath, who was once Prime Minister of Britain, and who had excellent relations with the Chinese. So our people first contacted him, and he was good enough to speak to his contacts. I got through to Saskia in my office and asked her to contact Tony Blair. But I don't have the number for Downing Street, she said. Tired out, and to be frank pretty worried by now, I raised my voice. Dial 192. Get it from directory inquiries. Tony Blair was good enough to write a personal letter to His Excellency Premier Zhu Rongji. I also contacted Peter Such, the head of one of our rival airlines, Cathay Pacific, who was based in Hong Kong, and who was also very helpful. And our British ambassador in Beijing and his team were enormously helpful. Finally, a half hour before we crossed the border, we got the word that we could enter as long as we stayed in the very bottom section of China. We soon realized this would be impossible. The winds would take us towards Shanghai, coincidentally a city I visited only 2 weeks ago, and a city that Virgin Atlantic has recently applied for permission to fly to. We then had word that the Chinese had held a press conference in Beijing and had stated that we had violated their airspace without permission. If we did not rectify this promptly, the consequences could be severe. At the same time, we received a message from our base in London, going through the probable sequence of actions that an escort fighter plane would adopt. We went through the sequence of events that we would try to adopt ourselves in order to comply. We were high over snow-clad mountains. To land would be suicidal. We then received a message from the Chinese civil aviation authorities. Please be informed that you must land at Lhasa Airport and cannot continue flying over our airspace because you cannot obey our requirements. Please contact later. You must operate the balloon as requested by Lhasa ACC. Thanks for your cooperation. Best regards at Ops of CAAC. Well, the words "thanks for your cooperation" were the only friendly words we had heard in a while. A balloon cannot land at an airport. The weather conditions were atrocious. It would be dark in 2 hours. We were over mountains, and we were carrying 5 tons of propane. We were being asked, in effect, to commit suicide. I wrote back to Virgin ICO Global Balloon Base, asking them to contact the Chinese, explaining all our problems. We received a response 1 hour later. Please be informed you must land. You cannot continue over our airspace. We were in a catch-22 situation. To attempt to land would mean certain death, but to continue without permission would mean that we'd almost certainly be shot down. I contacted the British ambassador in Beijing and explained our predicament. He promised that he and his team would stay up all night to try to resolve it. I sent the ambassador a note to pass on to the Chinese. We kindly advise that it is not possible to land now without severely endangering the lives of the crew and any persons on the ground. We cannot steer the balloon as it goes where the wind takes it. We have full cloud cover and cannot see the ground. We cannot descend through cloud as it will create ice on the balloon, resulting in US crashing. We kindly bring to your attention that we are doing everything in our power to resolve the situation and apologize profusely for not being able to comply with your instructions. We are not being disrespectful to the Chinese authorities. We are just in an impossible situation that we cannot resolve at present without endangering lives. We kindly request that you give our team more time to work on this problem. Our pilots have tried every frequency that you have given to US, but are unable to contact you. They will continue to try. Please can you advise some more HF or VHF frequencies? We kindly request a response to this message. We flew on nervously. After all the personal pleas from so many world figures, we hoped the Chinese wouldn't do anything too dramatic. In the early hours of the morning, to our great relief, the following facts came through. Since the Virgin Global Challenger hot air balloon has infringed the principles agreed by the two sides and the promises made by the UK side, and did not enter the airspace within the designated area, the Chinese side had no option but to demand that it should land. In respect of the appeal made by Ambassador Galsworthy, the Chinese side have made every effort to overcome all difficulties and have now decided to allow the balloon to continue its flight. But they request that it should leave Chinese airspace as rapidly as possible. If the Chinese side have new requests, they will be in touch with the British side. We cannot thank the Chinese enough. Thank you. Day 7, December 24, 1998. A bizarre thing happened to me as we left the Chinese coast. I received word from England. Many congratulations. Virgin Atlantic has been given permission to be the only airline to fly to Shanghai direct from England. British Airways has been turned down. Hurry home. It's a strange world. 1 minute terrified of being shot down over Shanghai in a balloon, the next being given permission to start flying a 747 there. It would have been delightful news if we hadn't found ourselves heading for North Korea. It seems that every country that did not welcome balloonists had a magnetic attraction to them. And North Korea is one of the most closed, heavily militarist countries in the world. We had been told not even to bother to apply for overflying rights. Bob went into overdrive to find winds to take us south through South Korea. In the meantime, Kevin Stass, who with Aaron Porter had been battling back at base to get our overflight rights, thought, give it a go, and contacted the North Koreans. To the surprise and delight of all of us, a quick response came, welcoming us to overfly. Maybe as a nation, they are now ready to become part of the wider world. For whatever reason, we were extremely grateful. They were the last political headache we had to face before. Heading home, we now had only the biggest ocean in the world to cross, 5,200 miles of the Pacific, America, and then the Atlantic Ocean. After everything that had happened, in the first 5 days, we had only traveled a third of the way around the world. The Pacific has claimed many other hot air balloonists who have attempted a crossing. The day before, Per and I successfully crossed the Pacific in a hot air balloon. 10 years ago, a delightful Japanese balloonist attempted it and perished. Only 3 months ago, Steve Fawcett hit a thunderstorm over the Pacific and was brought down near Fiji. We therefore all have enormous respect for the Pacific Ocean. And yet strangely we were so relieved to have got through the political problems of the last few days that we felt somehow we would have a drama-free trip. It started well. We ended up crossing South Korea as it turned out, since Bob had already been working on changing our tracks successfully before North Korean permission came through. We then traveled on to a beautiful dawn over Mt. Fuji and Kansai in Japan. We could see literally thousands of people thronging the streets looking up at the balloon as we passed overhead. Will Whitehorn, my right-hand man, who was in Kansai, contacted the balloon and said that it was one of the most remarkable sights of my life, standing and watching the whole place come to a halt. The winds began to pick up, to our great relief. We found speeds of between 150 and 180 miles per hour. We were being sucked into the jet stream, and we needed it. We had used up a lot of fuel flying over the Himalayas and had to race home. We had no more than 5 or 6 days duration left, and 2/3 of the way to go. But with these speeds, we calculated we could cross the Pacific in less than 40 hours. A day to cross America, another to cross the Atlantic, and then home. Our spirits were high. We really thought we were in with a chance. Then we received an urgent message from Bob Rice. It began, "We have a potential problem that is giving me great concern." If Bob had great concern about something, then so should we. Specifically, he went on, "There's a trough out there that will have an elongated shear line from around Hawaii, northeastward. The result of a pattern shift like that will take the balloon southeast towards Hawaii and back into the Pacific Ocean. We need to get to the trough before it starts to shear. Maximum speed is critical, more so than on any other occasion." We knew what he meant. If we did not get through on time, we would be turned southward and end up in the water. Or as Mike Kendrick, our base commander, said 5 minutes later, "This is a matter of saving you going into the drink, so for God's sake fly." So we went as high as we could to get extra speed, but we could only find 10 knots more at altitude. We have had a long nights flying towards this trough. Bob reran the figures to see if 10 knots was sufficient to push us through and on into America. If not, it is fortunate that the capsule was built to float. But I have no plan or wish to test it. The diary ends here, just as things started to turn for the worse. I didn't complete it, as we were too busy just trying to stay alive. I remember just before going to sleep on that last day, when we had all but crossed the Pacific and had the States ahead, with the weather forecasters saying that we would be home in 2 days. The winds were so strong, about 200 miles per hour, and it looked as if we were going to cross America on Christmas Day, with Father Christmas dangling far below us, and be home for Boxing Day. As I was going to sleep, I thought that this was almost too much for one person in their lifetime, to have such fantastic experiences, and to be so fortunate. It was only when I woke up that I realized that fortune was not going to shine on us this time, and that we were going to end up landing in the Pacific, rather than being the first to travel around the world in a hot air balloon. The wall of bad weather that we tried to beat had got there before us. We went as high as we could to get through it. We went as low as we could to get through it. But to no avail. It was as if a solid brick wall had been built right down the coast of America to stop us. We were very fortunate to find winds that took us back out into the Pacific, towards the only islands for thousands of miles, Hawaii. Once we were 60 miles from them, we crashed into the sea. The balloon dragged over the waves, bouncing 300 feet each time, like the bombs in the Dam Busters film. Pushing the dome on the roof open, we climbed out, hanging on for dear life. Then finally, as the balloon hit the sea for the 10th time, we threw ourselves off, once again to be plucked out of the sea by helicopters, which just managed to reach us. No wonder Virgin sponsored London's helicopter ambulance service. On Christmas Day I landed in Hawaii and decided to get to Necker Island, where all the family were. On Boxing Day I landed to find a slightly surreal thing happening when I arrived. Nobody was in the big house. All my best friends and relatives were gathered at the very far end of the island, having a children's party. The reason it was surreal was that I'd written my will the day before I'd taken off in the balloon, and in it I'd instructed that, if the balloon had gone down and my body had been recovered, I was to be buried at that end of the island. I wanted my best friends and family to be at my funeral, and I wanted to be laid forever in this very special place. And so it was strange to be there in person, looking around and thinking, my God, what a different kind of party this could have been. And it was at that time that I thought, okay, I've had these incredible experiences. Somebody has been kind to me and I've survived them. These exploits had helped me put Virgin on the map, put me on the map, and given me some fantastic memories to tell the grandchildren one day. But I'd pushed my luck as far as I should. Now I could see that if I could use the position in which I'd found myself, where I could pick up the phone to President Mandela, or Bill Clinton or Tony Blair, and get straight through, I might be able to do something worthwhile. To use that power and position to try to fulfill my original dream, from when I was 15, starting the magazine and writing in my first editorial about trying to change the world. I have always tried to use my position to help charities. When Diana died, I was flying back from America, and like everyone else, I was deeply affected by her death. But, as a great friend of the princess, I felt it was important that I try to find a way to make something positive come out of her death. So I decided to put together the best album ever in her memory and pledged 100% of the profits to a Diana Memorial Fund. Eric Clapton, Sting, George Michael, Krista Berg and Paul McCartney all contributed willingly. But I also wanted a fantastic song that would reflect Diana's life, and which could be sung at her funeral, and then go on the album. I knew Elton John was a friend of Diana, so I asked him if he would be prepared to perform Candle in the Wind at the funeral, and if Bernie Taupin would adapt the words to make them more appropriate for the occasion. I also made it clear that I wanted the song to go on the tribute album. All of this had to be cleared not just by Diana's family and the Queen, but also by the Church. 3 frantic days of negotiation followed, but the Queen was minded not to allow it, so I called Tony Blair and asked him if he would intervene. Fortunately he did, because Elton's performance of Candle in the Wind captured the imagination of the entire world, and made what was already a terribly difficult occasion almost unbearably poignant. At the time Elton John's career was in a lull, but imagine my surprise when, a few days later, Elton withdrew permission for the single to go on the charity album. I wrote him a long letter expressing my anger, which I decided not to make public. But as is the way of these things, someone unscrupulous found it when rummaging through Elton's dustbins, and inevitably it found its way on to the front page of The Sun.
Thank you for listening to The Book Reader. Stay tuned for the next episode tomorrow. Please subscribe for updates.